You're listening to Fighting Back News Talk, current events, and political commentary. Now here's the host of Fighting Back, Uncle Ronnie.
And then we're gonna
Thank you,
look at
Mr.
crops.
O'Connor, and welcome back. We're here with Peter Martin. And
Extraordinaire. You forgot that
Extraordinaire,
part.
yeah. And one of our show's sponsors. And, of course, we have Ray Michaels and your host, Uncle Ronnie. Thank you again for joining us. When we last saw you, we were in danger here because the Earth was warming. And
We didn't see an end in sight.
And we didn't see an end.
It was like Ice Age,
and we
number
didn't,
20.
And we didn't even know why. So,
Right.
Mr. Peter Martin,
Well,
tell us why.
basically, if we remove industrialization from the equation, which I think we now can after looking at that last chart, what do you have left? I mean, basically, it's the sun. And what people don't realize, even some scientists don't really realize, is how much the sun changes over time. The sun is quite variable. And so when the sun goes through its phases, and it even has a relatively strong magnetic field that also changes its intensity over time. And when that magnetic field fluctuates, what happens is it allows more or sometimes less cosmic rays to enter what's called the heliosphere. It's a kind of a bubble around the sun and the solar system. And those cosmic rays, well, they either hit the Earth in larger or smaller numbers, depending on the strength of the sun's magnetic field.
So what you're saying is there is a cycle that we can look back to and pretty much predict, not completely accurate, but kind of predict what's going to be happening in the future by looking back in time.
Yes, we can, and I would even say more than one cycle. We have so many different kinds of cycles when looking at the sun. There's a 200-year, a 400-year, a 1,000-year, and then you can go even to much longer cycles than that. But what's very interesting is that when you look at these solar cycles and you then look at ice core samples and marine samples and deposits to figure out how temperature has changed here on Earth, lo and behold, they match up.
So you mean there's hard proof and fact of what you're explaining to us right now?
Absolutely.
And scientific.
Absolutely.
Then
Peer-reviewed literature.
Then
Why-
why would I
Yes.
ask, why do we have this constant fear? We've had, I think, AOC saying, oh, we only have 12 years left, the sky's falling, we're all going to die. That's just not true.
No, it's not true at all.
The cyclic thing, and the problem that we have as humans, we're not around for 300 years, so we got to rely on a lot of generations back to record what happened.
Yes.
We're only here for such a short time. But tell us, over the eons through, how did they know these cycles? I mean, nobody's been around. Nobody's really recorded it. I mean, I didn't record last summer as being the hottest on
Nobody's
record.
been around. That's absolutely true. And Mike, maybe we can go back to slide number 1 and just take a look at that again. And this is just one example, but GISP2 is such a wonderful piece of data.
That's the ice core.
It's an ice core taken from Greenland, and it is derived by looking at the isotope of oxygen. It's called oxygen 18, and they take a ratio between a more rare occurring isotope, oxygen 18, and regular oxygen, which is oxygen 16. And by looking at that ratio, they get a proxy for what the temperature was a long, long time ago. So even though no one was standing there 1,000 years ago with a nice thermometer in the medieval warming to hold it out and say, oh yeah, it's 25 centigrade. Well, no, nobody had a thermometer. But we can look at this ice core and we can see, okay, over time, this is how temperature fluctuated. And we can see from this chart that when you get these spikes upward in temperature, they burn themselves out in about 250 to 300 years. You don't see any spike on this chart that is, let's say, 350 years long. None of them are. They're brief. And so this is a big takeaway from this chart, is that just because we've had global warming for a few centuries, that does not mean that we should project that indefinitely into the future. It would, in fact, be historically inappropriate to do that.
Wow. So you have some other slides that you wanted to show us.
Yeah, I think we can go to slide number 2 and take a look at more recent temperature. And on this one, you can see that it goes all the way out to last month, February of 21. And you can see on here, we rose up in temperature from the late 70s. We talked about the 70s being a little bit colder. And temperature rose from there. We see a very high peak in 1998 for temperature. And then we entered what is commonly called the plateau. And you can see, for obvious reasons, why it is called that, because temperature didn't really make any net progress up or down for a long, long time. Now, the global warming advocates, they cling tightly to 2016, which was a little bit higher than 1998. We managed a whole 0.2 degrees Celsius hotter than 1998. And it just so happens, I mean, this is a true statement. Right now, today, temperature is lower considerably than it was in 1998.
Wow.
So we now have had almost 23 years of really very benign, not too hot, not too cold, gently going up and down all along the way.
So that's why they changed it from global warming to climate
change, because
Yes.
they were aware of the cyclic nature of this, and they knew that they could not pull the wool over people's eyes by saying we're going into a global climate or a global warming
Right.
when in fact the temperatures are going down, or vice versa. But we can say with certainty that the climate may be changing. But how long does something have to happen before we consider it a climate change? I mean, for just 2 years of above average temperatures or below average isn't climate, it's weather.
It's weather, yes, absolutely. How long does it have to go? Well, it really depends on your perspective. And one of the perspectives that I would like to take today is just looking at the impact of the weather, let's say, on our crop production, Ron, because this is obviously very important. And I think when people look at data like what we have in slide number 3, people will notice, okay, when we got around to the years 2017 through 2019, when temperature fell rather abruptly from that admittedly recently high temperature in 2016, what happened there? Temperature dropped, and what did we get? Do the pundits out there who are calling for anthropogenic global warming, do they talk about that rapid dip in temperature that occurred? No, they don't. And another thing that they don't talk about is that when temperature fell, which is what they are telling us it would supposedly be a good thing, it was disastrous for crop production. And imagine temperature did not, in the grand scheme of things, did not even fall that much. But it was enough in that time period to cause farmers to tweet on Twitter, "No plant 19." In other words, they couldn't get anything to grow.
Wow.
And we have been fortunate to have a recovery in our crop production since then. But what happened in 2019, you may not know it, but you were fed from carryover stocks in wheat that came from the 2018 production. The world did not produce enough wheat in 2019 to cover the world's demand for wheat.
You know, this sounds, it almost sounds biblical. You know, Joseph
Yes.
warned
Joseph
the Pharaoh.
for 7 years of
right?
famine.
Yeah, he warned the Pharaoh, put it in the stockpiles, put it in, save it up, because he knew that this was cyclical. Now, Peter, I'm going to say 2 words to you, and I just want to see your response. Al Gore.
The inconvenient truth.
I'll give you just one word in response. Politician.
Okay.
That
Does
says a
that
lot.
basically cover it?
Yep.
Right? So, yeah, I mean,
I would say more moneymaker, but or
okay.
opportunist.
opportunist,
Yeah.
sure.
Carbon,
made a-
can
he
you
made-
say carbon credit?
He made a lot of money speaking these falsehoods and scaring people.
Yes. And the mantle has been taken up by Bill Gates, and he's taken it, as you heard earlier.
I bet
to-
he bought it.
to
'cause
a whole
he has
new level.
He has a lot of money.
Yeah,
He bought the mantle.
yeah. And part of the issue that comes with having a lot of money and a lot of power, and we have to be actually understanding of this, even though I don't think any of us are billionaires, but we have to be a little bit understanding that the natural psychology of a person in a position like that is they don't want to lose their power or their money. They like it. And so what tends to happen is a person in that position gets very controlling and tries to manipulate society in a certain way so as to protect what they have.
Now, Peter, you and I were talking before the show, and we found it so strange yet so amusing that you see these politicians, you see these people of influence coming in, and you had mentioned that Bill Gates is now one of the largest owners of farming land in the world.
Yes.
Absolutely
Right?
correct. He
All right.
is the largest farmland owner in the United States.
So in the United States, so you would think that if he didn't see that that was going to be a moneymaker, that he thought he's going to lose a lot of money, he wouldn't be investing a lot of money in there.
Exactly.
And when you think about our former president Obama, if he's worried about global warming and ice caps melting and seas rising, he wouldn't be buying beachfront property.
No, he would not.
So they're talking out of one side to the people, and they're doing something completely different for themselves.
Exactly.
And
And
so-
let's also remember all the private jets that they use.
Well, they
to-
have to, though. He said to
Yes.
save the world. Who was that? That was, isn't he the climate czar now? Oh, gosh, what's his name? Uncle Ronnie.
Oh,
It's
was
not
it?
Uncle Ronnie. Uncle
you
Ronnie
mean
doesn't.
John Kerry.
John
John
Kerry.
Kerry.
Yes.
The reason why I have to have my yachts and I have to have my private planes is so that I can save you.
Yes.
Because I'm working very, very hard.
Yes.
Just for you.
yeah.
Just
absolutely.
for you.
And
Hey, it's not for me.
Yeah,
It's for
and
humanity.
Really, it's this kind of hypocrisy
Wow.
that we really, truly need to look at. I mean, anyone who's listening to the show right now and you're hearing this, really, take a step back. Just think about it. Think about the hypocrisy that we are seeing from these one percenters, these globalists, these billionaires. Think about what they are doing and how on earth does that make sense based on what they are telling us, and it does not make sense.
And you know what, Peter? Uncle Ronnie and I talk about this all the time. We present facts to you. We present graphs and charts and where you can go to find out the information. We're not telling you what to do. You are a free people. You go out on your own. You do your own investigation. Once you look at it, you make the decision. Don't listen to us.
Absolutely.
Go search it out for yourself. Find it. We're just presenting this to you. So wherever you stand on this, you may think that it's, we have 8 years left according to OAC, and that's fine. You can do whatever you want. It's a free country. We just like to find the facts, and if you're being spoon-fed something from the mainstream media that differs from what other highly regarded scientists are saying, you need to make your own decision. I think that's what you're saying, Peter.
And Ray,
Yes,
here's the
absolutely.
really important thing. We've heard a lot of now this cancel culture, shutting free speech down. This is a part of free speech. This is our opinions.
Or
and-
even dialogue.
and
They don't
yeah,
even
this
want to
is-
have a conversation.
This is
Right.
dialogue, yes, and you have the choice to make based on hopefully the facts that are being presented by both sides of the argument, and this is key. You don't want to just listen to one side and say, "Oh yeah, this is the way it is."
That's the
Definitely
First
not.
Amendment.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And so always seek information and free speech. Always, always, always. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, that's how I came to these conclusions myself. If we go back 6-7 years ago, I was a novice in this area. I decided I needed to learn about it. Well, many of the articles I ran into, of course, advocated anthropogenic climate change and global warming. So you have to go through it. You have to dig into it.
Peter, on a personal note, when did the little light bulb above your head light up and you go, wait a second, what's going on here? When did that happen?
It did take a few years, but I remember it distinctly. It was February of 2017. I started researching ice age cycles, and I thought, oh wow, there is something completely different going on here from what I have ever been told in the mainstream.
Not caused by the civilized world,
Right.
So,
but rather caused by the...
Uncle Ronnie, you mentioned this. You know, when you see this picture of this polar bear on this little floating piece of ice, and you say, this is all that he has left of his habitat.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah.
Is that a photo op? Is that...
It
what,
is.
What is that? Tell
It
me
is,
what that
It was
and-
Al Gore dressed as a polar bear.
Yeah, and the ice has come and gone over the years. We've seen it accumulate. We've seen it break down. One thing that I was just going to kind of ask you guys this evening is think about something for a minute. If I were to give each of you a glass of water, okay, room temperature, okay, and I asked you guys, what would you do if you wanted to cool down that glass of water?
Put it in the fridge.
Well, or reduce the ambient temperature somehow or other.
Or
air
add a piece of
conditioning.
ice.
Air
Add a
conditioner.
piece of ice.
Adding ice.
How
Number
about
of
that?
things.
Add a piece of ice. I mean, that's what we do when we want a more refreshing glass of water. We add a piece of ice.
Except
Well,
if you're from England.
yeah.
They don't
Yeah,
use ice.
or
That
Mexico,
If
perhaps.
you've ever
Yeah,
been
I
to
don't-
England,
yeah,
you know
okay.
exactly what we're talking
Right.
about. You ask, could I get ice in this? They take one tiny
cube.
little cube out of the vault. It's in the back. It's like so precious to them, and they drop one in.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, add ice. Okay, take the analogy. What is happening right now on the South Pole? We have ice sheets breaking off and falling into the ocean and floating away from Antarctica. Now, the global warming advocates would like us to think that this is emblematic of global warming, and we should be afraid of that. We're losing our ice caps. Well, guess what? The recent literature put out by major universities shows the conclusion that our current, and I'm just going to say it, I think we're already in the leading edge of global cooling, but it's starting out, if we're not there yet, we'll be there soon. It's starting out the same way it started out 400 years ago. The research has shown that the Little Ice Age, which bottomed out in the 1600s, that began when ice broke off of the polar ice caps and drifted out into the ocean and served to cool the oceans. Because then the ocean carried that coolness all around the world and served to cool down the planet. Wow. So what we see here actually is we have a system. The Earth is a system. It has a natural cooling mechanism when temperature gets to a certain point. And we are at that point where the natural cooling mechanism is starting to kick in.
You mean what you're saying is God knew what he was doing when he made all of this?
Imagine.
Yeah.
Just imagine, yeah.
And the important thing here is knowing a little bit about weather. As the water temperatures either increase or decrease, it changes weather cycles as well.
Yes, it does. Yeah, yes, it does. And we see changes in the atmosphere as well. I wasn't going to get into that too much today, but a part of approaching what we call grand solar minimum, which comes along every 400 years, and yes, we are due for another one, Part of what comes along with that is that the jet stream changes. We all know about the story about Texas recently.
Yes.
Amazing. I'm so tired of hearing global warming. The Texas story really should be the end of global
were all
warming.
freezing.
I mean, when Texas freezes over, okay, it's not like North Dakota, okay? That should be enough. I guess for some people it's not, but it should be enough. But what happened there is, it's a very natural process. The sun's magnetic field weakened. In turn, the Earth's magnetic field weakened. And what happens then is the jet stream, which normally goes west to east, it starts to go, it dips. So it moves in a meridional manner instead of zonally. And so sometimes it'll carry cool temperatures south, sometimes it'll carry hot temperatures north,
Right.
which is why we've had these really strange weather patterns all around the world recently.
And tornadoes as well. Tornadoes and hurricanes.
But you know what?
Tornadoes and
I love that
hurricanes.
word that they use. It's unprecedented. This is unprecedented.
Yeah.
Wow.
In the
Till you
history
go
of the
back
world, it's
400
probably
years.
happened a million times.
That's right. Now, tell us about all the plants, the animals, the coral reefs that are extinct. Bill Gates talked about that. This is gone forever. It's never coming back. Tell us about this whole thing. Has there really been this great die-off of plant animal life?
There has been a die-off of life on Earth. That is absolutely true. Before we get carried away with that, like Bill Gates did in the opening quote, let's take a step back and let's really take a look at what might be some of the causes of that. And the literature is full of this subject. It just so happens, there's a physicist, Adrian Malot, and in an article in National Geographic from 2007 called Ancient Mass Extinctions Caused by Cosmic Radiation, scientists say. I'm just going to very briefly read this to you, what he wrote in that piece. He notes that as our solar system orbits the Milky Way's center, it oscillates through the galactic plane with a period of around 65 million years. The space between galaxies is not empty. It's actually full of rarefied hot gas. As our galaxy falls into the local supercluster, it should disturb this gas and create a shock wave, like the bow shock of a jet plane, generating cascades of high-energy subatomic particles and radiation called cosmic rays. These effects could cause enhanced cloud formation and depletion of the ozone layer, killing off many small organisms at the base of the food chain and potentially leading to a population crash. So what we see here is cosmic rays, the intensity or lack of intensity of cosmic rays. That's what we should be looking at when we look at ecosystems and see, oh, they're dying. Well, let's take a look at cosmic rays. Or they're thriving. Let's take a look again. Maybe we're getting much fewer cosmic rays. So it just so happens, and I'm going to take another quote here from a more recent article, November 4th, 2020. This is in the publication Space Weather. It's an article called Long-Term Observations of Galactic Cosmic Ray LET Spectra in Lunar Orbit. And in the lead author, Dr. Looper, says, as of 2020, this intensity, meaning cosmic rays, after declining during solar maximum activity, has recovered to a level that exceeds by a few percent the historically high values seen during the deep solar minimum at the start of the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter mission in 2009. So, Mike, if I could ask you for slide 11, we'll just take a look at that. And it is very important to note in this regard that in the direct measurement era, in other words, the time during which people have been able to measure cosmic rays, which of course does not go back hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right, right.
This is only several decades we've been able to do this. But in this era, we are absolutely at the all-time high bombardment of cosmic rays right now. So that is something that needs to be definitely taken into account, and blaming people for the deaths of ecosystems that really should be blamed on cosmic rays, this is very inappropriate.
Well, it says here that they increased 19% in the last 50 years. That was in 2009. So it's not only these ecosystems, but it says more strokes, heart attacks, and adverse
Psychological effects.
psychological effects.
That's right, yes. And we're noticing it. There is definitely an uptick right now occurring for heart problems in people. And there's an abundance of literature out there that shows the connection between cosmic rays and the cardiovascular system of human beings.
And we know for sure it's not fast food or Hostess Twinkies,
Or
right?
COVID.
Yeah.
COVID, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, absolutely.
Everything's blamed on COVID, and actually, if I'm not mistaken, the cosmic rays would even destroy COVID viruses.
Listen, if you can be Uncle Ronnie, can I be Cosmic Ray? Because I think you got to have something like that, right?
Cosmic ray, I love it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
We don't
So-
don't pay him for his
Peter-
content. We pay him for his humor.
So, Peter, tell us any closing thoughts, because I see that we're coming down short on time. We wanted to give you an opportunity to give us this synopsis. You've been studying this. You went in. You had an open mind. You had heard what was going on. You started doing the research, and now you've come to some conclusions. And what would you say to our viewing audience here that would help them in going through their own individual process to find out what's going on with climate change?
I would say most certainly, absolutely, climate change is occurring. There's no sense in doubting it. And it is a more vigorous trend recently than it has been in many, many decades, even centuries. So the climate is changing rapidly. We need to look for the right causes of it. I think we've identified those today. We've looked at the reduction in the sun and the Earth's magnetic field. We've looked at changes in the sun's cycles, and how those cycles affect the weather of the Earth. But what I really want to emphasize here is that we need to get away from the fear-mongering. We need to realize that, yes, the climate is changing rapidly. We may even get into some scary cooling now, like we've experienced in Texas. But humanity has gone through this process many times before. If you go and you look at the Paleological record, the human species has gone through some 20 of these mass extinctions that have occurred over time, and we've always made it through.
Peter, we thank you for being here. We're really running short of time. I think we can pretty well safely say that mankind has not created this problem. Is that correct?
Right.
Absolutely.
So go
not.
out and be fruitful and multiply.
What we would like,
Absolutely.
is please subscribe to this channel. Peter, we'll have you
Share,
back.
share,
Like, and
Yep.
please, your comments. I've gotten some really nice comments. I was surprised we got people from the East Coast actually watching.
That's
From
awesome.
Pennsylvania and those environs, and of course Africa, England, and the Philippines. And we're so excited to have you here with us. And Mr. O'Connor, thank you for driving this. Our floor manager Neil DeSante. And we'll see you on Monday. And we're going to have Peter back. There's more to this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Well, I shouldn't say iceberg because they're melting.
Not unless it's breaking off.
So thank you and good night. See you Monday.